Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all with us. This morning, we have a panel discussion focused on the Creative Destruction Lab and the leadership role it took early in the pandemic, convening innovators to tackle the new issues and challenges suddenly front and center for the entire population. My name is Rosemary Hannum. I'm the director of the Sandra Rotman Center for Health Sector Strategy here at the school, and very pleased to be the host for this morning's event. Today, we're going to start off with an overview of the CDL from Sonia Sennik, the executive director. And then we're going to have a panel discussion featuring Sonia, as well as Dr. Shana Kelly and her experiences with her startup, ARMA Biosciences. And Dr. Kourosh, Saeb-Parsy, and Dr. Jurgen Riedel will talk about their experiences with their company, Oxford Immune Algorithmics. So I'm very pleased to introduce everybody. Dr. Shana Kelly is a university professor at the University of Toronto and a member of the departments of chemistry, biochemistry, pharmaceutical sciences, and biomedical engineering. She is also the Nina B. Schwartz Professor of Chemistry and Biomedical Engineering at Northwestern University and the co-founder and CEO of ARMA Biosciences. Dr. Jurgen Riedel is the co-founder and CTO of Oxford Immune Algorithmics. He is a theoretical physicist by training and an expert in data analytics and machine learning with more than 25 years of industry experience in 3 continents. Dr. Kourosh Saeb-Parsy is the Chief Medical Officer for Oxford Immune Algorithmics. He's also a Professor of Transplantation at the University of Cambridge in the UK. He's an abdominal organ transplant surgeon and also a research group leader at the University of Cambridge. Sonia Sennik is the executive director of our Creative Destruction Lab. She is responsible for the CDL's strategic, operational, and programmatic leadership, coordination, and oversight to ensure the success of the lab and its ventures across 10 university-based locations in Canada, the US, the UK, and France. And our moderator is Professor Alberto Galasso, a professor of strategic management at the Rotman School, and he holds our Rotman Chair in Life Sciences Commercialization. So today's session is the second of 5 in our seminar series, Learning from COVID-19, Leadership from the Private Sector. Each event in the series explores lessons from our experience with COVID related to the role of management specifically. The seminar series is one of many events put on by our center. We are supported by the school and the Rotman family, and we focus on 3 main areas: research and thought leadership, and second, outreach events like this one to encourage dialogue and learning on topics related to management and healthcare delivery. And then we also have educational programming for emerging and senior leaders in healthcare management. And one of our newest programs is the Global Executive MBA for Healthcare and the Life Sciences, which is designed for working professionals in mid to senior positions in healthcare. It's a full MBA customized for the health sector with a global focus. And our 4th cohort started last month, and we are now recruiting for the fall of 2022. So I'm now going to hand it over to Alberto to kick off our program, and you are all welcome to place comments and questions in the chat as we go. We'll do our best to address everyone's queries, so please relax, grab your coffee or your tea, and enjoy the conversation. So over to you, Alberto.
So thank you, Rosemary. I'm really happy to be moderating this panel. We have some great expertise in terms of executives, academics, and also entrepreneurship. Just to make sure we all are on the same page, we decided to start with an introduction to the Creative Destruction Lab. Sonia has prepared a short presentation, so let's start with that.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Alberto. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see it. Just anyone give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Yeah. Okay, great. So pleased to be here today. I'm just going to take us through the concept behind Creative Destruction Lab to start. So our mission is to enhance the commercialization of science for the betterment of humankind. So taking a step back, the thesis of the lab is sort of described like this. If you're in outer space and you're looking down at planet Earth and you ask the map to show you the location of early stage capital flow into tech companies, you'd see this massive spike over Silicon Valley, maybe a hill over Boston, a hill over New York, maybe a hill over Toronto as well. But if you're in the same spot in outer space and you ask the map to show you the location of scientific breakthroughs, the whole map would light up. So the professor that started this lab, the founder, Professor Ajay Agrawal, sought to answer the question, why are these 2 maps so different? Why is there great research and development happening everywhere, all over the world, but it's being commercialized in such a narrow area of the planet. And there's typically three answers you'll get to this question. People will say, oh, Silicon Valley, they just have better ideas, which if just empirically is not true if you reference academic journals. Then they'll say, oh, well, in Silicon Valley, there's just more capital. As you know, capital is globally available. And so that can't be the full story. Then they'll say, well, they have that hustle, Silicon Valley hustle. And again, that could be a part of the story, but it can't make up for that huge gap that we're seeing. So if it's none of these three things, what is it? And the thesis of the lab is that it's not the lack of ideas, effort, or capital that prevent early stage ventures in translating regional excellence into innovation and entrepreneurial success. It's actually a failure in the market for high quality judgment. So what is judgment? An entrepreneur wakes up in the morning, has a list of 1,000 things they need to do to build their business. They can only focus on 3 things. The act of picking from the list of 1,000 things down to the 3 things requires judgment. And there's different types of judgment. There's academic judgment, there's lawyers, there's venture capitalists. At CDL, we believe that the most valuable type of judgment that an early stage company can receive as they're just growing their company is entrepreneurial judgment. So judgment developed by somebody who's done that before, someone who has taken an idea, built a business, operated it, scaled it, and exited in some sort of liquidity event, potentially even done that a few times in their career. They've sort of built the muscle for judgment. They know, what is important at what time, and they can give very, very valuable mentorship to early stage companies at that stage in their growth. So if you can think about CDL as doing one thing, it's that we've designed the marketplace for judgment, and we deliver it through a very structured program, which I'm going to take you through. So right now, this is what the program looks, this is what the program looks like when we are in lecture hall. So this is from a few years ago, but we are in 10 sites, as Rosemary mentioned. Before pre-pandemic, since there's a sort of pandemic theme of today's talk, I wanted to take a look at what the world looked like for CDL in September 2019, when we were kicking off that year. We were in 5 sites in Canada, and we had just kicked off our site in Oxford. In 2020, we also added a site in Paris, as well as a site in Wisconsin and Atlanta. So we scaled over the course of that year. And again, we're just at the front end of a couple months into our 2021-2022 year. We now have added an additional site at CDL Seattle that is also running a health stream. So this is sort of the CDL world as it stands right now. And in these rooms, what happens? So you took a look at that lecture hall. This is sort of what's happening in the lecture hall. You have the venture founders that are in with a network and community of people, creating sort of that marketplace. We have in the front row our fellows and associates. We have scientists and economists and investigators. We have business students, corporate partners, founding partners, and we have a moderator that manages the discussion. And so what happens in this room is each of the companies, let's say it was the health stream at CDL Oxford, there'd be 20 to 25 ventures that start at session 1 in the health stream. And at a CDL session day, where we get together one time every 8 weeks, the companies would come in for 10 to 12 minutes, and there would be one focus of this conversation. So it would be their 3 measurable deliverable objectives between now and the next session. So the company comes in, meets a bunch of the mentors and says, hey, these are the 3 things we think are the most important things to build our business. And the mentors will sort of say, hey, why are you focusing on building your second product when you haven't sorted out your IP strategy? Or why are you looking to hire a sales team when you really need a CTO? And so the mentors will work with them to figure out sort of, are these really the best objectives in the small group meetings? Then they'll come into this large room, and all of the mentors will come together, and they'll talk about sharpening these 3 objectives. At the end of that 10 or 12 minutes, the venture founders go, they have to agree to the objective and say, yes, I believe we can do these in 8 weeks. And they leave the room. Now, after the ventures all go through this process in the day, a very important part of the program happens, which is the venture founders are out of the room and the mentors participate in what we call deliberations. And the moderator asks one question to the mentors in the room. They say, okay, who here would like to mentor Rosemary's company for 4 hours over the next 8 weeks? And, if 10 hands go up, we typically whittle it down to about 3 just for logistics. If 1 hand goes up, great, Rosemary's company is invited back to session 2. But if no hands go up, then the company is not invited back for the next session. So it creates this natural attrition effect where over time, the companies that are the best fit for the mentors or performing best on their objectives, right? Every time they come back and say, did we deliver on our objectives or not? They spend more time with our mentors over the course of the program. And of course, when we do that deliberations, what we're really asking the mentors for is the investment of their most precious resource, which is their time. So if they're willing to put their hand up to invest time in that venture founder or that team, that's a really good signal to that team of, there's an exchange here and there's potentially, a great mentorship opportunity and giving them some momentum to grow. So thinking about, that's the micro of how the program works. We do that 4 times in a year, ending with super session. Why does it matter? So why is it important to match the right stakeholders in a marketplace for judgment? We believe that the difference between a venture failing and potentially being successful is getting the right mentor at the right time, at the right stage. So with that judgment that they need, with that guidance. Also, from an investor standpoint, the efficient deployment of capital. So being able to identify potential great investments early. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is just a selection of a few CDL graduate companies that have come through the program in the last few years that have gone on to raise follow-on rounds and grow companies of 200, 300 employees developing their tech. And so now zooming out again to the broader picture, on the left-hand side of the screen, we measure our success with one metric, which is equity value creation. To date, all of our alumni companies have contributed $15 billion of equity value created. We have 10 sites. This year, we have about 600 companies coming through the program across 16 different specialty streams on the right-hand side of the slide. And that's split across 28 cohorts. So a cohort is about 20 to 25 companies in any specialty stream area. This just gives you a sense of the growth. We were talking about management through COVID or development of specialty areas in health. Health is our stream that's grown the most in the last 5 years. And this is just a timeline since the lab started in 2012 of how CDL has expanded. When I talk about the mentors in the marketplace for judgment, just a couple more slides here, we really mean people who have done it before. So people like Patrick Pichette, he was the CFO of Google for 8 years. He's currently the board chair at Twitter. Siobhan Zillis, who works at the office of the CEO at Tesla and Neuralink, who really have that entrepreneurial expertise that they've really have built that muscle for judgment. We also have scientists that attend 2 of the 4 sessions a year, again, that really true leaders in their field that come in and can speak to the technical validity of what the venture is doing and meet with the venture and potentially collaborate with them as well if there's an alignment and an interest there. Just from a mechanical standpoint, we started building a digital experience for CDL, motivated earlier than COVID, but really exponentially increased the drive on this as soon as that was happening, so that the experience, whether you're at CDL Oxford or CDL Paris or CDL Vancouver, is very, very streamlined for the ventures and for the mentors and students. Again, I just showed you a few snapshots of our graduating companies. And this is, again, just, Xanadu raising 120 million. They're building quantum hardware. Ada valued at 1.2 billion earlier this year. And TensTorrent, focusing a processor optimization company, raised over 200 million earlier this year as well. So we are at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto, so we will not forget the really unique aspect that is offered to our students. So we have a course at CDL, and it's not your traditional MBA or BCom course in that there aren't specific case studies and there aren't sort of group projects and case studies. What we do is we match, just like we match mentors with ventures, we match students with ventures. So what they'll do is they'll join the class, and their role or their task is to support that company for the 9 months that they're in that program. So when a company comes out of session 1 and they have 3 objectives, and one of them is, do market research on waste disposal or some sort of area, that could turn into a student project. So their assignment is very flexible. We've had students, get so enmeshed with the teams. They're doing pitches and working on their sales and business development strategy. We've had many students go on to actually join the companies they were matched with in business operations, or sometimes even as CEO. For example, Liran from BenchSci is their CEO, and met them through the program. And it is a really unique opportunity for students to take a look at early stage tech, exposure to the engagement and judgment exchange process, as well as entrepreneurial strategy and business development. And then You're probably thinking, how does all this come together? We are not for profit. We have corporate partners that participate at CDL as well. And we provide them not just with access to the CDL session rooms, but with also insights to the economic impact of new technology through something called the CDL Partners Program, where we focus on things like the simple economics of blockchain or the simple economics of digital health, breaking down what are these new technologies lowering the cost of, and thus what new opportunities are there in these industries now that we have these technologies available. And then, yes, just the comment on CDL education is just a very new take on how to educate around innovation and entrepreneurship. Last note before I just wrap here is we also have something called the CDL Apprentice Program. It's focused on providing opportunities for science and entrepreneurship education to young students, women identified students that between the age of 14 and 18. They come and they can experience the CDL session. They can also take modules in AI or climate, our CDL climate stream. The idea is just exposing them to these types of businesses and role models early on could potentially change the trajectory of what they choose to do in university. And the idea is that hopefully they'll think, hey, this looks hard and this looks tough, but it's not so hard that I couldn't do it. You know, like it's a bunch of people supporting each other, building around an idea, team building, and potentially they could, you know, have this experience and see themselves in that space of science and entrepreneurship. This is the last slide that sort of outlines where CDL Health we operate in. We have a variety of different types of health companies coming through. So bringing the marketplace together, the mentors and the ventures together is quite an interesting process. We offer CDL Health in Vancouver, CDL Toronto, Oxford, Wisconsin, and Seattle. And that's just sort of the last slide there to give you a sense of the different areas of health technology that the program runs in. So I'll just pause there and Alberto, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Sonia. This was very, very interesting and very useful. So let me start the discussion asking you to travel back in time, right? Let's go back to February, March 2020. Really is the time in which people start realizing that COVID was not something that was contained in China. Some bad news started coming out from places like my home country in Italy, and you are there managing this global operations in a lab that is all about flying people in university to be in the same room, right? Because that is what the CDL does. It brings people in the same space in classrooms with professors and students. So how nervous were you and the other member of the executive team, and what kind of options did you consider? And can you tell us also what eventually was done by the CDL to respond to COVID?
Yes. So the initial reactions for me, many sleepless nights in January for me. I started seeing all of the news about big conferences being canceled in the summer of 2020, and we started building a contingency plan. Even though all the sites majority were very confident that, doesn't really seem to be here. The attitude was very different in January. Luckily we had prepared, how we would go fully virtual. And Alberto, you put your finger right on it, which is, it was a bit of a crisis in that our whole program is predicated on bringing people together and packing lecture halls and then mixing them together, mixing the marketplace, allowing for community network effects, having dinners together. I mean, that's been for, the 8 years that CDL was running pre-pandemic, that's all we did. And the idea of pulling that online was just, no one could even visualize it. And so we did put together that contingency plan that now has become the core operating function of CDL, which is a fully virtual CDL. And there's a ton of work that goes on behind the scenes. The CDL team is incredible. Just operationally organizing exactly where people need to be minute to minute, in which Zoom room, between Slack and Zoom and our community portal that we built. So we developed a Salesforce portal for people to just streamline their prep. We were able to support the community in doing it. I would say also the community was very, I'd say, open and forgiving, and they really leaned into the virtual experience, even though of course it's not as great as sitting next to your colleague or your peer or your friends that you get to see at those CDL sessions. So the first part was pivoting to digital, fully digital. We are still doing 100% virtual sessions. We haven't yet had an in-person CDL session. The last one was in March of 2020 in Calgary. And so that was the first was, how do we operationalize CDL there? The second piece was, okay, now that we have this, pandemic crisis, what role do we play in that crisis? What role does an innovation program play when there's, a new type of problem that the entire world is facing?
So let me build on this. So if I look at a lot of other institutions, like I look at a lot of universities out there, they reacted to COVID was simply, okay, let's continue, try to at least save what we're doing. Let's move digital, but not change anything, not introduce anything new. You don't see university launching new master programs in 2020. But I saw the CDL doing new things, opening new sites and even launching this recovery program that was specific for COVID. Can you tell us, why you chosen to really react in a proactive way and not just in a passive way, and tell us about this recovery program that is, probably the most impactful, one of the most impactful things that you implemented?
For sure. So we were sort of faced with that question of, how can, at the time when you have a new novel crisis, you change the way you operate. Novel crisis, requires a unique response to what's presented in front of you. And so we thought to ourselves, we play a role. Of course we do. We need innovation now more than we've ever needed innovation. All these amazing researchers need to commercialize their stuff as soon as they can possibly commercialize their stuff. So how do we do that? And what we decided to do was this, as Alberto said, a stream called CDL Recovery that we ran globally. So at the time, we had 8 CDL sites participate in the CDL Recovery program. And we blended all of our mentors. They opted in to be a part of recovery. We recruited globally, and we had companies from over 80 countries participate in CDL Recovery. We had over 400 of our mentors participate. And we, as we do with everything at CDL, we really structured the program so people didn't feel like they were sort of joining something and they didn't exactly know how long it would take. It was like, these are exactly the half days and times to come meet with these companies, just to see what would happen. So we started broad, just saying, okay, we need to bring together an innovation program focused on the response to COVID. But then a couple of sessions in, we realized, okay, there's 2 types of problems and 2 types of solutions here that we're identifying. There were the always on solutions. And I would say always on solutions are things like lockdowns or things like masks. It's just always on. You need them. They're for good practice. Social distancing is always on. Everyone should just know to social distance. And then there were information-based solutions. And we realized quickly that always on solutions also are sort of broad, like, vaccinations and things like that. We wanted to stay out of that because there was so much great work happening in the world around that type of innovation. Where we thought we could really support the innovation community and entrepreneurship community was information-based solutions. So, for example, I don't know if you have it, you don't know if I have it, we don't have information. So the thing we use is a blunt instrument like a lockdown, just to make sure we don't spread COVID. So was there tech out there that was focused on information-based solutions that we could help get in front of our mentors to get that support to start building momentum and supporting the economic recovery and health recovery impacts?
So let me ask you a question about the CDL recovery. So I read a blog post by Professor Hellman, that is one of the people that run the CDL operation in Oxford. And when he was discussing the CDL recovery program, he was saying one surprise was that a lot of the companies that applied with technologies that were related to COVID actually were applying with technology that were not, only applicable to COVID. There were broader technology that could have all sorts of use. And one of the very important roles of CDL mentors was really to understand whether, is this an opportunity? Is COVID an opportunity for the venture? Is something that is really, important for the growth and the scale up, or is probably something that should not be done? And the company thinks it is a COVID company, but it should not be pushed forward. Does this resonate with you? Is there, was there a lot of learning about this idea of should we have a COVID strategy or not?
Oh yeah, that was probably the most talked about topic in deliberations. And the mentors really took that on as, we're putting in, we want to put our focus and drive companies that are really COVID specific and they can really help with this specific problem. Because of course, almost every company that I'm sure you've been around as well, it had to have some form of a COVID strategy. Every industry had to have some form of a COVID strategy. I mean, the gym that I go to has a COVID strategy. And so the intention was, as we talk about the efficient allocation of judgment and efficient allocation of capital, was let's prioritize the companies that are really responding specifically to this crisis, because that's what the program is set up to do. And so that was a huge part of the deliberations. And really that was led by our mentor community in being that discerning.
Another thing that is impressive about the recovery stream was that the timing was really short. The time horizon was really short, right? In a sense, with the CDL, we usually have these 2 months kind of lag between when you get the objective and you actually implement the objective. But there, the time pressure was really different, not only because COVID was really a big social problem out there, but also because a lot of people were working on this technology. There was a huge competitive pressure, right? So how did you perceive this time pressure in sense of like someone that finished the program, but also someone that served all these ventures having to deal with this time pressure?
Yeah. So just for everyone on the call, typically CDL is a 9-month program. And as Alberto said, we do 8-week sessions every 8 weeks. So when mentors raise their hand to contribute 4 hours, they're meeting with the company maybe once every 2 weeks. And what we did with recovery is we cut that in half. And so instead of 8 weeks, it was 4 weeks. And so when they raised their hand for 4 hours, they were meeting with the venture every week. And the venture also was prepping their venture documents, prepping for the session on a 1-month cadence instead of a 2-month cadence. And it did support, I think some of the ventures, appreciated that they were getting so much, access to mentorship quickly. The mentors wanted to connect in and support. And it created momentum. I think it created a sense of urgency. I think we were all feeling that sense of urgency. So really, I think it was a great way to sort of channel that through the program and make sure everyone was getting set up for the next thing. And we really felt like, when you're in those session rooms, the mentors and the peer-to-peer relationships that built from mentors in Europe to mentors on, the West Coast of the United States or the West Coast of Canada was just so special. That without that program, we never would have had that cross-site pollination of advisory and also just, peer-to-peer connection. And it was sort of that coalition of the willing feeling. People were coming into the sessions. It was tough. It was, a lot more work than a typical CDL. And because it was virtual, it was sort of all the work and none of the fun of sort of the dinners and the lunches and getting to meet people in the hallways. But really the energy was just so positive, and it was really heartwarming to see how the community responded. They were so eager to support these companies, and the ventures just stepped right up to the plate. It was incredible.
Thank you. I think now it can be a good time to actually start discussing with the other panelists that are actually, of a venture that went to through the recovery program. So let's start with Jurgen and Kourosh. Can you tell us about your venture in the technology behind that?
Sure. Yes, I can maybe start, then Kourosh can take over. So we are basically, we are a healthcare and biotech startup, and our focus is on monitoring the immune system over a longer period of time. So that's really where we focus on. So instead of having like snapshot data of like blood tests, we have an AI platform developed which we collect longitudinal data and therefore be able to adapt to a patient's or a person's baseline. So rather than having population-wide data, which is very coarse and crude, we have a platform which can adapt to a personal needs and also be able to flag any kind of deviation from immune data, which prompt to any kind of underlying onset of disease, or if you are if you have like like a condition, then able to monitor much more precisely. So that's where we enter the innovation, and that's also in part of the COVID, really like absolute the most important innovation we bring to the market, where we tap into the potential of monitoring the immune system, also analyze how different populations are and how they are, as we know with COVID, totally surprising effects, how COVID affects certain type of population or cohorts of people, which is that precisely where we really see, I mean, before the COVID we started, but now we see how important it is and how neglected this aspect is in medicine. Maybe Kourosh, you can continue a little bit.
No, absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, it's as a clinician, you know, it's clear that the way that we monitor patients is very crude, right? The number of white cells in my blood can go up, you know, between 300% and 400%, so 3 or 4-fold. And actually, my doctor would tell me, "Oh, ignore that. That's normal, right?" You don't have to be a doctor to realize that actually, if your white cells have increased 3 or 4 times, right, something physiologically important has happened to it. So we're beginning by challenging this concept of binary categorization of biological health data as normal versus abnormal, and actually saying we need to identify what my personal baseline is, and then once I start to deviate from that, if we are able to recognize that deviation, that will generate insights. Now, in order to be able to do that, of course, we need to collect data over prolonged periods. And ideally, we need to make the process of having blood tests accessible and democratize that. So really, those are the two components that we are putting together, generating large amounts of data that then we can analyze using our proprietary AI and machine learning approaches, but also creating the, if you like, the infrastructure required for people to have frequent tests in order to be able to detect deviations. There is a sort of, there is a parallel here with COVID testing. I've just 5 minutes ago, I've done a COVID swab test, right? There's nothing wrong with me, but you know, there is a belief that actually having this data on a regular basis will be useful. Well, why not have this data on my white cell or my liver function test? Why do we have to wait until I'm jaundiced, right, before we do a blood test looking at my liver function test?
Right. So for instance, I mean, it's like if you think about how much data you collect, I mean, first of all, in the social media arena, but also like, you know, fitness data, right? So you collect your steps, and I mean, that's like all over the place. But first of all, rarely anything is done with the data. Maybe it's some specific applications, but it's very shocking that in healthcare, I mean, in like really physiological tests, this never really done like this. And we should be able to monitor like a modern car, right? You have like a regular checkup, you have all the data, you do data dump, and then you make a diagnosis, right? But that's not happening. That we really want to change. And I think that's where we really have to have a paradigm shift, especially now after the COVID pandemic. And we know that's not the first or the last one, I mean. So that tells us there is fundamentally something missing, right? And that's also for us important to make that, just also a low-cost availability, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me build on this. So I understand, sort of further understand, the company was founded a couple of years before 2020. So what happened in 2020? What were the discussion between the two of you and the other members of the management team in the company, and why did you decide to go through the CDL recovery program?
Well, first of all, I mean, the most initiative to do that is to really get exposed to a much wider audience, to a wider expert panel. I mean, if you're a startup, and I mean, we have been active since October 2018. And if you look at the growth curve, I mean, we started very tiny team, 2 of us first, and then we just grew like very gradually over 2019. But still, I mean, we had concept, we had R&D going, but not really good understanding what markets we need to hit, how we actually get to the next level, right? From just a small setup. And I think that really helped us CDLers to really accelerate and also give us world experts to really answer or the questions and also help us to see, well, are we on the right track? Is it, do we miss something very important? I think that's what really prompted us to be part of the CDL program.
Let me move to oh, sorry.
So I was just going to say that actually one of the experiences that we found very useful was to be sort of in a productive manner, to be challenged on our ideas and our concepts. I think this, being able to stress ideas, people from outside who've not really been living and breathing that sort of concept to come in and say, well, actually, that doesn't work, or have you thought about this? Exposing ourselves as a team to that external insight and challenge was very important in helping shape what our value proposition is.
Right. So I mean,
yeah, that's great. And I'm going to ask you about the actual lesson that you learned from the mentors in a couple of minutes. I want to now to bring in Shana. Shana, can you also give us a brief introduction of ARMA Biosciences and the technology behind the venture?
Sure. So similar themes here. ARMA Biosciences is commercializing a new electronic sensor technology that we think will really be transformative for bringing more information, particularly into virtual healthcare. So it's a very simple sensor technology, simple to use, simple to manufacture, very cost effective. And what we intend to do with this is to be able to give people devices so that biomarker measurements can be made in the home, so that virtual healthcare can work a lot more like it does in the doctor's office, right? In a doctor's office, there's a collection of data and really important measurements of biomarkers that then inform clinical decision-making. Right now, in a virtual setting, it's not possible to do that. But with this sensor technology, we think we can kind of make that breakthrough and allow virtual healthcare to be much more precise. So that's the company. And it's based on a sensor technology that we had developed in my labs at the University of Toronto about a year or so before the pandemic. I mean, what the pandemic did, I think, for many scientists is it gave us a lot of time to think about applications and what we should do with new technologies. The labs were closed. There was no more, progress, results, anything. So all you could do is kind of talk to people on your computer and think about the future and think about applications and impact. And I've done diagnostic startups before. I wasn't sure I really ever wanted to do another one because it's been such a hard sector in which to commercialize. But all of a sudden, all eyes around the world were on diagnostics and the fact that we just need them so desperately, right? I had heard from so many venture capitalists that they were out of diagnostics. It was too hard to make money. And then we watched trillions of dollars be drained from the economy, right? Because of a lack of diagnostics. So all of these things kind of converged. And to me, the pandemic was kind of a call to action. And we had a great technology that was really first in class. We thought it could be very disruptive. And so I grabbed a couple of the trainees who had been working with me on the technology, and we decided to get a company formed and to get going.
So that's very interesting. It's the first time that I hear it makes sense that because labs in the university were not as active as before, because the university was closed, people started asking questions, okay, what can we do with the technology that we already have rather than thinking about developing new things? So if I ask you not to think more as a professor, how did you think, that the overall research activity, even at scientific level, commercialization level, was changed because of COVID? What do you think, was the impact on your field of this pandemic in terms of research and commercialization?
Yeah, I think it's impacted everybody differently, right? I mean, some people have had so many struggles and, the personal lives turned upside down and it's just been a kind of net drain on what they've been able to do. For other people, and I think I'm kind of on the fortunate side of things, the pandemic and the fact that we all went virtual, right? It gives you so much reach to people and information. And I think a lot of commercialization and the activity around it, it's about being able to reach to people, investors, advisors, to collect information, to think about framing a business case. And that actually became a lot easier once we were all parked at our desks. So there's a part of me that thinks there will be an uptick, and there's also been, you know, money coming in, more venture capital, more access to capital, broadly speaking. So I do think there is going to be, when we look back, we'll see, you know, the uptick that came from the pandemic, and maybe also this kind of reflection type of period that I was talking about may factor in too. You know, all of a sudden you have a little bit more time, and you can think about things that maybe you just didn't have the time, or that you know, the openings in your schedule to do it. So I think there could be a net positive in that respect coming out of this very challenging time.
So you went through the CDL here in Toronto, the health stream, and you actually are also involved as a mentor in the CDL here in Toronto. Can you tell us, you know, why you decided to go through it, and also tell us what were the most important lessons learned for ARMA Biosciences with the interaction with the mentors during this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we decided to form ARMA Biosciences. As I mentioned, I kind of linked arms with a couple PhD students in my group who had never started a company. And so I knew there was a lot of work to be done, not just on building the company, but also kind of building the team and educating the team about what this was all about. And commercialization, for people that have never been through it, it's a really strange world, right? Compared to working in a lab, getting a PhD, writing papers. It's just a totally different set of rules and priorities and everything. So I thought that, you know, going through CDL, which I hadn't really done before, it would give me an opportunity to kind of help the trainees see how this was all going to work. It would certainly get us exposure in the ecosystem, hopefully, you know, find some capital to get going with, maybe reshape the business plan. So I thought it was a good way to just try to get things kicked off. And, you know, we reaped benefits that I just never would have anticipated. I mean, I've started companies before. I know the ropes, I know how to raise capital, I know, you know, the whole life cycle I've been involved in, but I learned a lot. And you get so many different perspectives. You have people in your industry, outside your industry, you know, just all kinds of their own personal experiences that kind of come into the discussions. And I picked up all kinds of people. You know, I ended up with an executive chairman who was somebody that I actually knew, but I hadn't seen in a long time. And we reconnected through CDL. And now I work with him on a daily basis. And he's been just transformative for the company. So you make those kinds of connections. We had many other, you know, mentors that, you know, just gave us so much of their time and insights and everything. It was really just a great way to pressure test what we were doing, to get, you know, very well networked. We did find sources of capital. So that was all.
In terms of this thing of like, is COVID an opportunity, or is COVID something that should not be pushed for the venture? Can you tell us how much the CDL and the mentors help you thinking about, you know, whether COVID was actually the key market or not?
Yeah. So we had used our technology for a variety of things, kind of coming into starting the company, and detection of SARS-CoV-2 particles was one of the things that we had done. And so we were kind of floating that as an application, because we had this way to just kind of put a probe in the mouth and tell instantly whether there were SARS-CoV-2 particles there. And so it would be a very effective way to just instantaneously screen people. And so we floated that, but I knew in my heart that you know, the timelines just weren't going to be right. You know, we were going to build that product, and it was going to be, by the time we built it, you know, the world would have moved on to something else. And the mentors also kind of came along with us on that ride of like really debating what's the beachhead, what's the right thing. And we spent a lot of time at CDL debating it. And it was a very healthy discussion. We eventually landed on doing something totally different and building a first product focused on chronic disease and heart failure management, which We've stuck with that. We identified it as a beachhead, and that's the product we're building. We have a major strategic partner now on board that's helping us with it, and it was clearly the right decision. So that process we kind of emerged from through CDL and through the great feedback we got from our mentors.
That's great. So let me go back now to Jurgen and Kourosh. Can you also tell us about your experience with CDL Recovery and what were the main lesson learned from the mentors during this the period, and how it shaped the growth of the company?
Yes, certainly. I mean, first of all, we can confirm what Shana said about the CDL experience. I mean, we had very similar experience, certainly also distinct, but we definitely, I mean, we entered the arena with a quite diversified team. So we are not only academia, but also from a different kind of private sector experience. I think we have combined like 100 years of experience. So but that in other words, we already sort of thought about our products and how we place ourselves. But yet, I mean, it was not very proven to work, and we had to suddenly the arena of super experts, and we just got hit left, right, and center with comments, and we just sort of you have this kind of bold conviction, but then you have to draw back and say, yeah, maybe it's not that correct, or it's the right direction, but not right now. So we had a lot of interesting sparring times and different aspects. I mean, if you have lots of experts, yes, you have also very many different opinions. And for us, it was also important to select from all this kind of experience what really works best for us. So we had a lot of homework to do. I mean, it's nice to have lots of opinions, but it's also very difficult because you really have to do your homework, really get cranking on, consume and digest all the information, and then work with the mentors together. So, but on the other hand, we also had a great experience, and now we are also our board chair is also from the CDL connection. So that's a great win for us. We have investors from that connection, so we really accelerated our investment. We have now much better idea what markets we have to hit first, and also formally what kind of arena we have to set our technology in. So we opted for a clinician-guided approach, which has a lot of benefits to prove our technology, but also in the COVID environment to have a very guided approach, and also to basically use the technology not to detect directly COVID, but to help to reduce the contacts of patients with going to a clinic or a GP to expose to any kind of COVID or any kind of threats. But also if you are in treatment, obviously like cancer treatment, you want to avoid anything like this. So that's the direction where we gained our insight most and helped us very much to accelerate our direction. But maybe Kourosh, you can add to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's the process has been extremely helpful. I guess one additional component, which was a key sort of value add for us, was having clear deliverables. That's not actually always present in sort of mentor-mentee relationships, right? Whereby you have somebody who's offering advice and there's general sort of direction given, but it's quite easy, I think, for early stage companies to kind of get that advice and so that was a great meeting, and then go back kind of to the office into the old habits, and a day or two later you've sort of forgotten that influence that came. So what we found very effective with the CDL program is to have to go back and say, well, what did we do in response to that, right? This is what you suggested we should do. This is what we did. We've hit these milestones or we haven't. So that process, I think, was really useful. It's a bit like, I guess, being answerable in a positive way to investors, if you like, right? So that interaction, I think, was very good for us because it sort of kept us focused on direction. We had to kind of lots of ideas, but we had to clarify where we wanted to go, articulate that, and then deliver on it. so that experience, I think, was very useful.
And let me also ask you a broader question. So if you think not about your company, but in general about the technology and research field in which you operate, how do you think COVID has changed things, both from an academic perspective, but also from a commercialization perspective?
Sure. So I mean, it is interesting that actually long before COVID at least was on our horizon, and going back to 2018, 2019, when the company set up, actually one of the things that we aimed to do was to democratize access to blood tests, right? Our idea was, well, actually, you shouldn't need to go to the hospital to have a blood test every time, because if you do, it's costly, it's disruptive, and you won't be able to do it often. So actually our core strategy was to enable remote testing. I think what COVID absolutely confirmed in our view that was the right strategy, exemplified by the pandemic. But I think others, both clinicians and people who are developing technologies and commercial organizations, are also now much more receptive to this idea that actually, why is it that if you're a child on chemotherapy and you feel unwell, why is it that you have to take a day off school, mom has to take a day off work, you have to drive 3 hours to the hospital, wait 2 hours to get a blood test, wait 3 hours for the results to come back, wait for the clinician to look at those results, by which time is the next day, and you've been in distress and worry for 24 hours before you get that result. I mean, why does that have to be the case? Now, to solve that challenge, it requires multiple types of innovation, multiple partners. We talked about data, we talked about hardware, all of those need to come together. We feel that actually the world is now more receptive to doing that, right? We think that's a positive thing for patients and for companies who are trying to make this vision happen.
That's very interesting. Okay, let me cycle back now to Sonia. We're almost at 10 o'clock. Let me ask you this question. So now, we have the vaccines and things, hopefully are going to get better. What are the plans for the CDL in terms of like going back to the old business model, or kind of experiment with new things in the next couple of years?
Yes. So one thing that we didn't talk about a bit earlier when we talked about the recovery program, something that came out of the tail end of that was that we started a separate initiative called the CDL Rapid Screening Consortium. And so what became really abundantly clear over the course of the pandemic is that information gap, resolving that information gap, specifically in bringing people back to their workplaces, was really critical. And so we started with 12 founding members, some of Canada's largest employers. And we've since scaled, and we're supporting over 1,500 organizations across 9 provinces and 1 territory, implementing rapid screening in their workplace. And so we built a data infrastructure, engaged with partnerships across the provinces with Health Canada as well. We have support from Health Canada. And so that project kicked off sort of around August last year in 2020. And so we're still bringing on new companies every week through the Rapid Screening Consortium and offering them the support and the data system and the community building. And then I guess, this was a really unique project. We were able to extract learnings on key areas of innovation from the CDL recovery stream and from what we saw in the room, and saw where we could play a role in building that bridge between, these rapid tests and the Canadians that could use them to get back into the workplace safely. And so, I think it was a really unique opportunity. And if there were other opportunities like that, as we continue to evolve in our streams and identifying places where a not-for-profit could, really solve a collective action problem, almost like a social collective action problem and a technology problem, where one company isn't as well positioned to solve it as they are with multiple peers, that would be maybe something that we could continue to pursue. Is an impressive consortium. And let me ask you, so why do you think the CDL had an advantage in bringing together all these great partners relative to the industries by themselves or the public sector? Why the CDL was really so effective in that respect? Yeah, I think we were able to bring in all aspects, so the government, private, public, and be that party that sort of community by design is what we do in the program itself, right? We have the marketplace for judgment, but we're really thoughtful about, okay, so, who should Dr. Kelley meet with? Who should, who should Dr. Saeb-Parsy be meeting with? And how do we make their experience really efficient, really impactful, and, motivate them to continue to engage and also grow their, mentorship through the program or whatever else it may be. We sort of took that approach at a broader scale for the CDL RSC. And I think that the structure and the process, the discipline of our team and our ability to make things just really efficient for people to engage, I think has been critical. And also, of course, it just being having that mission of what we wanted to do with the CDL Rapid Screening Consortium was, to develop a cost-effective way to reopen the economy in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. We set a North Star, we set a clear vision about what we wanted to do. And I think being able to stick to that, which is driving up the number of people regularly screening per week, so Canadians screening 2 times a week, that has not changed from when we started this last year. And we were just sort of relentlessly focused on that one goal. And at many times we were pulled into other, maybe we should get involved here. And people would call and say, oh, it'd be great if CDL could get involved here. And we thought, no, this is exactly the void that we can fill right now, and where we can support the communities across Canada. And I think also that focus was really key.
Thank you. So let me ask now Shana, Jurgen, and Kourosh. Probably in the audience there are future entrepreneurs or people that are considering either starting a health business or applying for the CDL with their health business. What would be the advice that you would give to these potential applicants, or in general to young entrepreneurs that are just starting in the field? Shana, you may start.
Sure. Well, I think participating in programs like CDL is just a wonderful way to get started. I mean, learning how to commercialize, learning how to start a company. There's just so many things that you're not going to read it in a book. You're not going to take a course and figure it out, but you will get a lot of great insights, at CDL. And then the other, piece of advice, this was something that I kind of had to learn going into the program, but having commercialization experience, is that you're going to get a huge amount of advice. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? You're going to get a lot of it, and it's great, and it's priceless resource. But you have to learn how to just kind of listen and absorb and see which things resonate and see which things you think hold true, and then just kind of leave the rest. And CDL is there's a certain dynamic where it's kind of fast and furious with the feedback and the advice that you get. And you have to just kind of run with that and just go through the sessions and take it all in and then put it to work. So those are just some thoughts I have.
Thank you. Jurgen or Kourosh?
Yeah, I mean, I think I fully agree on what Shana said. I mean, those things I just want to add, it's really about also true to yourself. I mean, there are lots of opinions and lots of things tell you shouldn't do or you should do. But I think it's like, again, like you have to do your homework. I mean, it's like you have to ingest the information you have compared to your own convictions and experience you already have, which maybe not be totally exposed to the panel either. So I think that it's like your homework. You have to really spec out what works for you, what doesn't, and also to challenge yourself again if you're in the next session. So like sort of iterative process, but also I think, as Kourosh said, it helps you to really set like milestones, which you may be not able to set yourself if you're not in the program, and it really helps you to get laser focus on certain areas and also learn how to set those and also aim to fulfill, because you always have to show your progress. I mean, you really need to do your homework, really to say, yes, we worked on it, we learned from it, we have the next actions. I think that's really what you learn. I mean, besides having so many different opinions, but it helps you to sharpen your tools, your perspective of how to progress, but also sharply reflect what doesn't work for you and also reassure yourself what does work for you. I think that's really what I would say.
If there's time, just a couple of points from me. Competitions for startup companies are good, right? Because they focus you to really define what your value proposition is, consider all of the factors. So I think entering competitions is good. There's a difference with CDL, I think, is that actually for most startups, including us, it's basically almost impossible to get yourself in front of the type of mentors that CDL provide, right? Because actually it's, the assembly of the expertise and experience that's available through the CDL program. I think that's really, at least in my kind of experience, is unmatched. So actually being able to benefit from all of that through the program is hugely, hugely valuable. So there is the sort of the competition that you apply and then you win and you get, a few £1,000s or a few $1,000s, maybe a bit of mentorship, and then that's the end of it. But then actually the network, the connections, the experience that you gained through the CDL program is absolutely, I think, unmatched. So my advice would be to absolutely do it, but do it seriously and as best as you can, because it is a tough challenge, right, to get through the process. So put all your efforts into it.
That's great. Sonia, let me conclude with you before opening to the question from the audience. And first of all, I read in the chat that congratulations are in order. This morning, you were honored as a top 40 under 40. So congratulations for that. Let me ask you about people in the audience that may be interested in getting involved, either as a startup or as potentially a mentor. What is the process that they need to follow to connect with the CDL and see whether they can be a good fit or not?
So first, thanks a lot, Alberto. I really appreciate it. And I want to say a huge thank you just to Rosemary for organizing this and Alberto yourself for bringing together this amazing panel. It's just been a pleasure. I never get a chance to engage with the venture founders this way as well. So it's just an absolute honor. So we have a stream page on our CDL website, so creativedistractionlab.com. We have a landing page for every one of our streams, which gives you sort of the information and the thesis of the stream. It also gives you example mentors. You can also filter and go through our entire sort of mentor directory to get a sense of who would be in which room. Because some ventures there's a little bit of, overlap, would I fit in energy? Would I fit in climate? Would I fit in oceans or ag? With the health stream, there's different sort of streams within health as well. So I would say take a look at the website, and our applications are always open. So we do have the opportunity for ventures to apply. For mentors, similarly, if there was a specific stream that you were interested in, please feel free to email me directly, or we have our generalized inbox as well. But people are more than welcome to email the CDL team, and we'd take it from there.
Thank you. So thank you to all the panelists. Now I see there was quite an active chat. There are a few questions, but now let me start with just one question from Brent to Sonia. It says, what are the plans for the meetings for the next years? Like, are we going to keep the virtual format? Is going to be a hybrid? Is the plan to try to go back in person? I don't know if you can say something.
Yeah, I think that things have changed, as everyone probably on the call knows. Like, there's an advantage of being able to connect with people all over the world, which is really unique. And going digital really meant going global for us and really expanding and leveraging our global community. So I think that aspects of virtual are really essential to continuing to grow the global community. But there is something really special as well about being in person, and that in-person connection that you build with people, the sense that you get from, your mentor or your peer or your student working together in a room on a whiteboard, that can't really be replicated. So we intend on sort of continuing to see how that goes as we move back in person and using elements of digital and virtual. And I'd say for like things like the CES and I mean, I'm seeing a lot go hybrid. Like I think Justin Bieber is doing a concert in the metaverse today, where you can attend virtually somehow. I'm not going, but please let us know if anyone's going, how that goes. So I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of innovation to be had in the next little bit about just sort of communities coming together in different ways.
I see. And there's also a question in terms of like future international expansion of the CDL. Do you have any plan in that respect, or is just something that is not that easy to predict.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. So Ajay likes saying there is no map. He likes saying that
Okay.
there isn't the map with the pins, but there are there's definitely a sense of where strategically in what emerging technology fields should CDL continue to develop in, and then of course where are the world leading institutions that are doing research in these areas or geographies that we want to make sure that we start engaging in the global community. So we sort of think of it from those two perspectives: what streams, and also then geographically which sites. So yeah, we'll continue to do that as time goes on.
Thank you. So let's see, please, if there is any other question from the audience, this would be a good time to write it in the chat. Otherwise, I think, I want to, since there is no other question, I want to thank the panelists, and I can pass back to Rosemary for some concluding remark.
Thanks so much, Alberto. And thank you to the panel. It's been a fascinating conversation. So I wish everyone a terrific day ahead and invite you to join us for our third session, which will be happening on December the 8th. We're going to talk about lessons from COVID related to value-based care. So I will send out a note to everybody to let you know the link for that. And again, thanks everybody for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
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 Thank you all.